Alright, so today I'm going to talk about FDR, his New Deal, and specifically how his New Deal saved America. I'm going to be talking about, um, I'm going to be using mostly political cartoons found on the website, which I'll list later. Right, so this cartoon uses a baseball game to illustrate the election of 1932. FDR was elected on November 1932, and during which the Great Depression was affecting America and its economy, obviously. Here, there's two teams here, the Depression team and the Prosperity team, and which obviously the Depression team uh, is winning hardly, and the Depression team is composed of players' fear, pessimism, hard times, and panic. And the Prosperity team is made of merchants, industry, taxpayers, Roosevelt, the pitcher, and business. As we can see here, the old pitcher, Herbert Hoover, is exiting the field, and Roosevelt is, as Uncle Sam announces, Roosevelt is pitching for Prosperity. And we can see here Roosevelt, who is obviously younger, more vigorous, and more sporty than this old fat dude. He's using this New Deal to, I guess, trying to cure the Great Depression. And here, those four players on the Depression team are obviously in panic, and players on the Prosperity team are cheering. You can see they're pretty happy here. And even the crowd and this Earth figure here are cheering. This crowd symbolizes American public, which reacted pretty positively to Roosevelt's first 100 and I guess 103 days in office. And here, this Earth represents the global economy, specifically the European countries. Um, you know, they're trying to, I guess, trying to learn from this American baseball game. Um, in this cartoon, Franklin Roosevelt is a dealer in a casino, and here the gambler obviously symbolizes the American public. And here we can see the gambler's face is pretty happy, um, which is the result of, I think, Roosevelt's first 100 days in office and his numerous fireside chats distributed through radio. Um, those two things brought overwhelmingly positive effects to the American public, as we can see here. The first hand the American public had in years, and it says confidence here, which means before in during Hoover's administration, the American public was generally depressed, and Hoover kind of failed to address the Great Depression. However, FDR managed to do so by his fireside chats and 100 days in office. We can see here that Roosevelt's face is pretty handsome. I think the cartoonist did this because many American people saw him as a hero and wrote a lot of letters to him. Right. Well, this source is probably intended for a pretty broad audience because um, FDR, his New Deal, and his fireside chat was probably a very big thing at that time. So pretty much everyone knows about this. I would imagine seeing this cartoon on some general newspaper talking, and probably it would be an illustration of a short text saying describing the effects, I guess, of FDR's New Deal and possibly what FDR is intending to do. So this source this cartoon describes a scribe recording a lot of things in the bulk book of history, includes Congress Act, news, Roosevelt's message, and this is clearly a scene of describing the first 100 days of Roosevelt's uh, administration. We can see a lot of messengers coming from the White House continuously giving this scribe more work to do. Well, I think this is the author of this source holds a pretty neutral view of FDR because I don't think anyone is glorified here. It's just the author is trying to say that FDR is producing a lot of new acts, and the Congress is working pretty hard to, I guess, solve the economic problem in America. The purpose of this source is probably just to record and to educate the general public of what's happening in the political world. And yeah, I would see this as a pretty neutral reference source. Okay, this is an interesting source because this cartoon obviously talks about the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, and I want to first talk about the history behind this. So most countries, including the United States, use the gold standard before World War One, which means that our currency is based on gold, like actual gold. So the only way to increase paper monies in circulation is to increase the reserve of gold. And after the Great Depression, uh, many U.S. banks failed, so more Americans started hoarding gold, trying to avoid more, I guess, more economic losses. And this means that the U.S. government can't print more money to stimulate the market. And first started by the Great Britain, European countries started to drop the gold standard, leading to a decline of export demands in America. Again, this cartoon depicts the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, and this act didn't necessarily drop the gold standard in America, but instead it banned the export of gold, therefore securing the money circulation in the American market. Furthermore, what FDR, who is a judge here, did was he made gold price higher. And by doing so, lots of Americans sold their gold to the government, therefore gaining more money than they did before. And this act and Roosevelt's revaluation of gold indirectly inflated the US dollar and therefore stimulated the American economy. As we can see here, this boxing match has two players, the American dollars and the Great Depression. As you can see, the American dollar is clearly stronger and winning. And because the judge FDR cut loose the gold standard chain, the American dollar is about to win. And you can see back here, the American public is pretty happy about it. American public is here, and the Great Depression is pretty tired, sitting there waiting to be defeated. Right. And yeah, this all represents FDR's emergency power to announce the revaluation of gold. I think obviously the author of this cartoon wants to glorify or not want to glorify um thinks that FDR plays a major positive role in uh, rejuvenating America's economy, as this judge is obviously helping this player to be stronger here. This cartoon is also interesting. Its title is "The Future Visitor to Washington." We see a visitor here is probably from another country. He visits the Senate building, the House building, and the Supreme Court, which are all closed. And eventually, as he sees the White House, you see FDR popping out his fat head, um, and says that he is not only this is the White House, which is the symbol of the president's power, is not only the headquarters of the executive branch, but also the judicial and legislative branch. This obviously talks about the court packing plan of 1937, during which Roosevelt tried to, replace the 9 old dudes in the court, and therefore uh, expanding his full-on power as the president. And obviously, we can see uh, the author of this cartoon holds a pretty negative opinion towards the court packing plan, as well as the American general public. As we can see, Roosevelt here is obviously uh, pretty ugly, not as handsome as we saw before, and in general, this cartoon represents the American public's fear of Roosevelt turning the White House into a dictative like administration. So this would be, I guess, this would be the major opinion, the major trend of American public at that time. Nobody liked FDR's court packing plan, especially when especially when the Great Depression isn't necessarily over and the American economy still needs saving. Uh, Even FDR's fireside chat didn't save his reputation from falling. And finally, I find this cartoon the most interesting out of all because we can see that here FDR FDR's face resembles that of Washington and Lincoln. So basically, the author is implying that FDR is a combination of Lincoln and Washington. And while that is a pretty big compliment, I think it kind of makes sense because if we think about it, Washington, who founded America and whose retirement made history, and Lincoln, who emancipated the slaves and saved America from collapsing, they all, I guess, changed America. And I guess that's the point the author is trying to make. Authors indicating that FDR's New Deal and how he saved America's economy from collapsing is as important as that of Washington and Lincoln's deeds. And this is a site where I find all of my political cartoons from.